It's Danny Flexen here for Seconds Out. Delighted to be joined once again by Andy Clarke, top commentator, pundit, unofficial judge in more recent times as well. And boy, do we need unofficial judges at this time in boxing. How you doing, mate?
Good, yeah. How are you?
I'm very good, yeah. Not the most exciting Christmas I've ever had. I'm sure it's similar with you, but got through it, and that's the main thing, and hope for better times in 2021.
That's all we can do, really. It was a strange but expected Christmas, really. There's not that much more to say about it than that. Just not been a great deal to do, but there hasn't been a great deal to do for the last however many months now. And I've become slightly wary of allowing myself to get too invested in what may or may not be upon us in the next few months, because we've had a few false starts. So you just hope that progress is made, that this vaccine gets rolled out, that it takes an effect, and that finally people could start to plan for steps being made consistently and kind of predictably. Because without that, you look at anything, it's difficult for anybody to make any kind of plans, whether it's in the field we work in or anything else.
Well, fingers crossed, of course. I mean, 2020 has been a bit of a washout in many ways, but in boxing, we have had some highlights, which is good, and we'll talk about that momentarily. But I want to talk to you first of all about the big fight happening in Dallas on Saturday. Found out only this morning, maybe it was common knowledge before, that it's actually going to be at UK prime time, pretty much, which was a bit of an unexpected surprise, unexpected pleasure. So I'm pretty happy about that. And Luke Campbell, Ryan Garcia. Big fight to start off 2021.
It's a great fight. It's a really, really good fight. And it's one of those fights that I always find myself particularly attracted to because of the dynamic of it. You've got a fighter on the left-hand side who's got enormous backing in Garcia, huge reputation. He's got a massive social media presence, which I don't think is as important as people seem to think it is. But for promoters, it counts for a lot. He's done everything that's been asked of him so far, and most people seem to fancy his chances, because if you look at the odds, they are heavily in his favour. But on the other side of the card, you've got somebody who quite simply has achieved a lot more than him, has been boxing for a lot longer than him, and has been in much deeper than him. So how the odds work out to be what they are, if you've actually looked at this sensibly and analysed what the pair of them have respectively done in their careers, I'm not absolutely sure, but you get that quite often. It reminds me a lot of the fight we saw at the end of November between Daniel Dubois and Joe Joyce in that regard, with the dynamic of the matchup. Dubois, no senior amateur career, good junior, good youth, highly rated, done everything that had been asked of him, big backing with the promoter's fighter, and he'd shown a lot of potential, and people thought he would win that fight. Joyce, on the other hand, was what Luke Campbell is in this fight. The only difference being that Luke Campbell has done more than Joe Joyce even did as an amateur, and as a pro has been in deeper than Joyce had been against the likes of Linares and Lomachenko. The caveat, really, if you're a Campbell fan, and something you would pick out if you were a Garcia fan, is that Campbell's two biggest fights have both been defeats. And it's always a bit dangerous to take a form line off the back of a defeat. So if you were pro Garcia and you're hearing the argument that he's going to be out of his depth, that he's unproven at this level, then you would point to Campbell and ask the question, well, who has he beaten? And the biggest name that he's beaten would be Ivan Mendy. Is Ivan Mendy a world level fighter? No, you wouldn't say so. So that would be their kind of comeback. But we'll just find out so much about Garcia at the weekend. We think we know pretty much where Campbell's at in terms of his ability level. And it wouldn't be at all surprising to see Campbell pick him apart and beat him comfortably. But that's not what Golden Boy think is going to happen. It really isn't. And they just wouldn't have put him in this fight if they didn't think that he was going to win.
It's interesting saying about the two biggest fights of Campbell's career have ended in defeat, because this narrative does appear to have sprung up in the last couple of weeks that Campbell is perhaps someone who can't take that final step, who can't get the job done on the biggest stage. I think maybe that's a little unfair. What do you think?
I think it is unfair, because the fight against Linares at that point was flying really, really high. He's one of the top names of world boxing, and he very nearly won that fight. It was a really close fight on the cards. He didn't get it. It wouldn't have been a scandal if he had got it. And against Lomachenko, he gave a good account of himself. You could say it was one of those fights where he probably won a minute at least of every round. But in boxing, that at the end of the fight, that means you get virtually nothing. Yeah. So you can definitely point to those two fights and say that they proved something because they did. And they were two extremely difficult opportunities for a world title. But it is quite a dangerous thing to do to sell people off the back of defeats. And as I said, Golden Boy, I'm sure Robert Diaz would look at Campbell and think, that's great, but who has he beaten? And they would look at that record and they wouldn't see a lot because, as I said, it would be Ivan Mendy, and he previously lost to Mendy too. So they are very, very confident in Garcia. I'm less so because I think the performances he's put up so far, I wouldn't say he's necessarily done anything wrong, but I just do think this is a big step up, a real big step up. And he's training with Canelo now, with the Reynosos. That's a kind of tick in the margin because they must see something. And I'm just fascinated to see what's going to happen. I mean, a defeat is more damaging for Campbell, definitely, than it is for Garcia, depending on the manner of it, because Garcia can come again. For Campbell, you could argue that this is kind of it, that if he doesn't win this fight, then it's difficult to see a route towards a world title for him.
It's a bit unfortunate for Campbell generally that his two world title shots have come against such high caliber fighters in Lomachenko and Linares, and now he gets probably his third toughest test, and it's not even for a full world title. In another era, in another circumstances change, Campbell would probably already be an alphabet world champion, you would think.
Yeah, you need some luck, don't you? It's not, all things are not equal when it comes to world title fights. Some people get difficult opportunities. I mean, we saw Martin Murray against Billy Joe Saunders the other week, and there was a lot of being made of the fact that was his fifth world title fight, which is, an enormous amount of opportunities, but they were all really, really hard. Look at someone like Matt Macklin, who I work with most weeks, 3 chances, but all very, very difficult. One of which most people agreed he won, but he didn't get, and the other two very, very hard. And you need a little bit of luck when it comes to the opportunities that you get. And some fighters get that kind of rub of the green and some don't. And Campbell definitely hasn't, because Linares and Lomachenko, you couldn't really pick 2 more difficult fights than that. And as you say, this one isn't for a world title. And you would look at him and you would say that he's definitely of the standard to have won a world title. But it could elude him if he loses on the weekend. Then I did see someone suggest the other day that he should maybe look to move up to super lightweight, because whoever won out of Josh Taylor and Jose Ramirez would probably move on and vacate all the titles. But I just don't think he's a super lightweight. And he's just got a hard weight division, hasn't he? That's how it works out for some people. And that's definitely how it's worked out for him.
So I'm going to have to put you on the spot. It wouldn't be fair otherwise. Who do you fancy on Saturday night, and how do you see it panning out exactly?
I'm going to pick Campbell. I'll pick Campbell from the start, because the way I look at these things is just rationally and logically. And you look at who has done more, who has proved more, and it's Campbell. It's absolutely Campbell. It's Garcia is mostly potential, and Golden Boy have a lot of belief in him. And I was impressed with his performance against Romero Duno. I've done some of his fights, and that came off the back of a bit of a spat with Golden Boy, where they wanted him to take Duno late notice a couple of months previously when Avery Sparrow was arrested at the weigh-in, if you remember that. And Team Garcia said no, and I thought that was fair enough. And then there was a bit of an argument, and then he re-signed a new contract. And anyway, my point being that for that fight, Duno was being brought through as a prospect by Golden Boy too, when he was 20-1 and a big puncher. And that was really a proper fight where Duno absolutely thought that he could win, and Garcia wiped him out in a round. So it's not like he hasn't shown us that he can fight, because he definitely has. But I do think there are some flaws there, and I think Campbell is capable of exposing them. So I would pick Campbell to win on points, possibly a late stoppage. I do think this is too soon for Garcia.
Good stuff. Not good stuff for Garcia, but good analysis. Let's talk about 2020 as it's coming to a close. Before we talk about kind of fighter of the year and that kind of thing, what's been your personal highlight of the year?
That's a good question. It's a difficult one to look back on in a lot of ways, because some of it seems like so long ago, and some of it doesn't. January and February, when we had crowds, somehow to me doesn't feel like that long ago. I don't know why, but that start of the year doesn't feel like that long ago. Whereas Fight Camp seems like it was ages ago, and the chronology of that doesn't really make any sense. But it was. I mean, I've enjoyed all of it because the COVID era boxing that we've seen has been different. I mean, from my point of view, obviously no crowds is different. You're a lot further away from the ring. That's different. Everything about it just makes it slightly more detached and sterile, and just a little bit more difficult for that reason. But Fight Camp was definitely a highlight because I think the way Matchroom did that was really imaginative, and as much as anybody could, made the best of what was a difficult and bizarre situation. So I really enjoyed that, and the fights we had at Wembley Arena as well. That residency there, it was it's very, very enjoyable. I mean, what I enjoyed most, I think, about this post-lockdown boxing that we've had in the second half of the year is watching fighters step up and take an opportunity, watching fighters whose careers would definitely stall if they hadn't taken them, but who maybe found themselves in a difficult position anyway, just step up and take fights. You know, think about someone like Mark Leach, step up and took a fight against Kez Ashfaq, got a massive win, which hopefully should kind of kick his career on. And we saw a number of fighters do that. And I think Frank Warren deserved a lot of credit for getting that fight between Dubois and Joyce on and putting it on, because they were delaying it and hoping that they would get crowds, and in the end just decided to do it anyway. And that was a great setting at Westminster House. I've very much enjoyed that. So I think all promoters have really done themselves a lot of credit. It's been different for everybody, and like I said, for the kind of logistical reasons, it's been different for me. Not something I'm totally unused to, because it's been like covering an amateur tournament, basically, where you're miles away from the ring, because IEBA have this weird exclusion zone where they never want you too close. But I think what I'll remember about it more than anything else, although it's not really a highlight, is the kind of those final few days where somehow in this country, and I don't exclude myself from this at all, but somehow we were living in this world of utter make-believe where we seemed to think that this wasn't coming here. We could see the pictures from France and Italy and Spain, and somehow we told ourselves it wasn't coming here. And we're still thinking we're going to get the golden contract on March the 20th behind closed doors. And we're still thinking that the Olympic qualifier, which I went to the first few days of, might get completed. And we still all trooped off to that press conference for Usyk against Chisora for absolutely no reason whatsoever, as it turned out, because that was never going to happen in the original date or on the postponed date. So
same with Dubois Joyce, wasn't it? Wasn't the original presser for that quite early on in the COVID era?
Yeah, it was. And you look back on it now and you just think, I mean, who were we fooling? But you just kind of continue with real life until you're told not to. It's just been, like I say, you kind of, I've been listening to quite a lot of podcasts over the last few months about loads of different things. And one was about how the human memory is kind of imperfect, and people will see things and think that they've got the order of it right, and that the order they remember it in is actually the order in which it happened. And very often it isn't. And this year's been a bit like that, because we finished off with the golden contract in early December, and that tournament, which I really enjoyed, got brought to a close. That kind of linked that with a fight night we did in February, and somehow that didn't seem that long ago. And fighters we saw in March, we then saw again, and fighters we saw in February, we then saw again. But lockdown itself, that 4-month period, that seems like a lifetime ago. That just seems to be this kind of island all on its own. So it's been a bit of a confusing year, I guess, all around.
Let's get on to the main. I can't call them awards because there's no prize, there's no trophy at stake here. But I've been asking everyone I've spoken to in the last week or so. So first of all, British Fighter of the Year. I'm not going to hint too much, but there's been two kind of standout guys that most people have picked one or the other. But who is your British Fighter of the Year?
Mine, I would go with Terri Harper.
Okay.
I think three world title fights, 2 wins and a draw. Boxed really well in Sheffield in February against Eva Wahlström to win the title. And we kind of traced her journey through a bit because she appeared on Sky. She was supposed to be off TV, and then she appeared on TV when Kelly Avanesian fell through the first time, which was late 2018. So we kind of knew about her, and Steffi Bull was banging a drum for her. She boxed really well that night, won the world title, had a great fight against Natasha Jonas, got the draw, and then defended again a few weeks ago. So that's 3 world title fights in a year, and I don't think any other British fighter has done that. Another one I liked a lot that I was reminded of by a colleague recently is Denzel Bentley. Boxed 3 times post lockdown and won that British title, and that's always a great achievement. And there's a posse of kind of fighters sort of based in London or around London who have been making good strides for a while now, kind of in some ways led by Daniel Dubois, but not exclusively. And he's one of them. And you look at some of those other Peacock fighters. I thought Chris Bork had a really good kind of COVID period, had a really good year too. I mean, I picked 3 there, but my number 1 would be Harper.
Okay, good stuff. You're not going to be welcome in Manchester anytime soon, but we won't worry too much about that. Having Joe Gallagher and Tyson Fury probably both upset now.
Well, Tyson Fury's I kind of put him on a different footing, on a different plane. He's kind of like a world fighter. Terri Harper is too, because she's a world champion. But yeah, I think Fury will probably feature in some of my other answers.
Well, then here we go. International Fighter of the Year, and I'll allow Fury to be part of it, as maybe I didn't explain criteria very well. I'm not even sure what the criteria is, to be honest. So, International Fighter of the Year, or World Level Fighter of the Year, if you like.
I can't really get past Teofimo Lopez for that. It's between him and Fury, because those were just 2 absolutely massive performances, just mind-boggling performances in different kinds of ways. In terms of the performance on the night, I would say that Fury's is the most impressive delivery, if you want, for lack of a better word, because we thought that was a 50-50 fight going into that fight, and it just didn't turn out to be anything like that, which was enormously impressive. But with Lopez, it wasn't supposed to be a 50-50 fight. Lomachenko was a huge favourite, and he won the fight, and I thought he won it comfortably. I didn't understand the kind of furore over the scoring. I didn't think there was any debate to be had over the scoring. I thought he won quite clearly, and he was always in front, and he was never really in trouble. He got pegged back a bit towards the end, but he built up that lead, and it was just it was terrific, and delivered on what is mainly his dad had been saying for the previous kind of years building up to that. There's something really, really impressive about someone saying they're going to do something and then doing it. And that's what they both did. Fury said, I'm going to go out there and get on the front foot and stop him and take him out. And I just thought, no, you're not going to do that. You could win, but you're not going to do it like that. And he did it. And then Lopez, his dad was saying, we're going to do this after this many fights and this after, and we're going to box him and then Lomachenko. And they did it. And it's talking the talk is one thing, but then backing it up is fantastic when you see someone do it.
And now the final one, and probably the one I'm most looking forward to hearing your answer on, because you probably watch more boxing than anyone I've asked this question to so far. And that's, what's the best fight that you've seen in the whole of 2020?
That is a really good question. I mean, there are a few that stand out for different reasons, really. I think we would all probably point at Baranchyk against Cepeda, because it was just such an extraordinary occurrence to have a fight like that. You just don't see that kind of fight very often. So that will kind of stand the test of time as being just a fight that people will go back and watch on YouTube. I mean, I remember a fight between John Molina and Lucas Matisse not that long ago, probably like 6-7 years ago. Brilliant fight, and the kind of fight that you would, if it popped into your head, you'd happily go back and watch it at any time in the next 10, 20, 30 years, whatever. I mean, I really enjoyed Terri Harper against Natasha Jonas. I thought that was a terrific fight. Katie Taylor against Delphine Pursoon again. I thought that was a really good fight. we had that kind of run of female fights, which are very, very entertaining. I mean, something that did sail under the radar a bit was the Golden Contract, particularly when it came back in the latter part of the year. I really enjoyed the finals, the light heavyweight finals with Ricard Bolotnik and Sergey Michel. Ricard Bolotnik's kind of, there should be some kind of award in there for him somewhere, because he came from nowhere and took out some good fighters and did it in style to win that. And I just really liked that final between Jazza Dickens and Ryan Walsh. It wasn't fireworks, but it was two really good fighters. So much to admire about both of them in the way they behave and the way they conduct themselves, their ability levels. And it was just a shame that one of them had to lose, really, because they both have put enough into boxing to deserve that reward of the contract at the end of it. So that being played out behind closed doors, it kind of, in a way, it almost made sense to me, because you just got two perfect examples of what a professional athlete should be in those two, and no complaints from them. You could see the kind of the respect that they had for each other even more because there wasn't a crowd there, which kind of sounds like a bit of a strange thing to say, but there were a lot of good fights. I mean, I really enjoyed Mark Leach against Kez Ashfaq.
Oh, yeah.
Because Leach just stepped up and took his opportunity and boxed really, really well. Jack Cullen against John Doherty, I enjoyed that one as well.
Fight, yeah.
It was a really good fight. And again, another good example. Doherty didn't have to take that fight that early in his career. Probably wouldn't have if it wasn't for the coronavirus situation. Although knowing him, he probably would have, because he's one of those fighters. And Cullen's someone we've seen a lot of on Sky over the last 18 months or so. I thought he was a bit lucky against Zach Chelly, and then against Doherty, he just took another really hard fight straight away, potentially hard fight straight away. And a bit like we've got at the weekend with Garcia against Campbell at a kind of lower level. You've got someone who's much more experienced than the other in a professional ring. And in the end, it showed. But that won't be some kind of nail in the coffin for Doherty. I mean, he'll come back from that, definitely. Sure. It was those kinds of matchups that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed seeing someone like Jez Smith come back. Been out of the ring for a good while, took a really hard fight against Kevin Aguiarco, then was rewarded for taking that with a much more even fight against Ben Ridings and got the win. And he'll kick on now. And seeing fighters do that, take their opportunities. You see fights like Joe Laws against Ryland Charlton. Oh, yeah. Really good fight. And that's, Ryland Charlton's Josiah Matchroom, and he's going to box Florian Marku. And what we're seeing off the back of all of this is matchups that we wouldn't necessarily have seen before, where you're putting together a card, and obviously you want your top of the show and your co-main event to be good competitive fights or high profile fights. Then you do still have a little bit of room for prospect versus opponent, prospect with a name coming through that people recognize, but you can't have too many of them. So what you need more of now are just good 50-50s. They might not be people that less dedicated boxing fans have really heard of, but that's what you have to have. I mean, that's what you would always have had, but you've got to put people into entertaining fights. And hopefully that is something which will stick with us. Just one other one was, I really enjoyed watching Craig Richards win the British title against Shakan Pitters. And that's nothing against Shakan Pitters, because I know John Pegg well, and I know those guys well. And I know he's very, very dedicated and still learning, and he could definitely come back from this. But I've covered Craig Richards pretty much from the beginning. I remember covering his professional debut when he won after about 30 seconds, I think, against James Child. And I've either been there for or done almost all of his fights. And he was a massive underdog going into that fight again. And how, when you looked at the two records, and on the night he still was. And I was just sitting there thinking, this is a really close fight. This is a really good fight. And yeah, I mean, I don't, we're not close or anything, but, I've not been in the gym with him every day, but he's a good example of someone who's bided his time and then just really taken that opportunity. And yeah, it was good to see.
Good stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's loads of good fights. I thought maybe it's because of the whole COVID thing and we didn't see as many shows and it's kind of condensed, but it seems like there's been a disproportionate amount of exciting fights this year.
Yeah, I think so, and there's plenty coming as well. There's a good, you look at the end of January, Bektemir Melekuziev against Sergey Kovalev. That's a really interesting fight. Estrada against Roman Gonzalez coming up. That's a really good fight.
Yeah, great fight.
Josh Warrington back in action. Looking forward to that. But like I said, just these other fights, this other lower tier of fight that's being made, like Marku against Charlton, really good fight. And one of them's could be a draw, I guess, but one of them's going to pick up a defeat there. But it doesn't matter. And I think that's what they're kind of buying into now, these lads, is that it doesn't matter. If that's a good fight and you lose, it's not really going to set you back, because more than ever now, promoters are going to reward fighters who are prepared to roll the dice and take part in a fight like that. The loser, I'd imagine, will get another fight fairly soon after that, whereas someone who's playing it more safe and biding their time could be biding their time for a really long time.
And Kelly Avanesian, of course, Kelly, I should say, which is a brilliant fight on paper.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, absolutely, because that's been, it was December 2018 that was supposed to happen, and fell out right at the last minute, and then it was supposed to happen at the end of March, and we all know why that didn't happen. And I think people somehow had this idea that Kelly didn't want that fight, that somehow he was going to end up not taking that fight. But he was always going to take it. He always wanted it. I saw him a few weeks ago at the Golden Contract Finals, and, he looked good. He was looking forward to it. Avanesian will be 100% confident as well. And it's just a great fight. And it's good, I think, that gets the headline by itself on a normal Saturday fight night, rather than it being chief support to the White Povetkin or Povetkin White rematch, which I think was what was going to happen.
Yeah,
because that's a great fight for a Saturday night main event. That's exactly what you want. And but there's so much on the line there for Avanesian. If he loses, it's not that it doesn't matter, but for Kelly, if he loses, it's a big problem.
Good stuff. Well, always appreciate your time. It's no less appreciated because you haven't got much else to do at the moment, and neither have I.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm just kicking around this week doing absolutely nothing, and then next week I think I'll kind of start looking at things again. But it's quiet is just. I think the thing that I'm just getting slightly tired of, because I've got nothing to complain about through this whole lockdown period. I've been lucky. I don't really know anyone who's suffered or whose relatives or friends have suffered through COVID-19. I've been able to keep working for the most part, or do enough work that things are okay on that front. It's just so boring now. It's just so boring now I think one of the reasons why it's difficult to kind of work out when things happened during the course of the last 12 months is because nothing has happened. Nothing has happened. Nothing stands out. There's what have you done this year? And the answer is pretty much nothing. So it makes it difficult to kind of order things, but fingers crossed that next year we get just some kind of recognizable routine and regime back to our lives. People keep talking about normality. I mean, I don't know if anything will ever really be the same again after this, or if it is, it'll probably take a few years for people to forget about it, and stop obsessing about stop obsessing about personal hygiene. I think people should continue to obsess about personal hygiene, because that can never be a bad thing.
Great stuff. Well, on that personal hygiene related note, we'll bring this to a close, but look forward to seeing you back on our screens, and have a great new year.
You too. Thanks, Danny.
Cheers, mate. Take care.